When America entered World War I in 1917, they faced an enemy that had been fighting for years. A continent already bled white, scarred by trenches, choked with poison gas, and littered with the bodies of millions. The doughboys, fresh-faced and naive, stepped into a nightmare. But even in the depths of that man-made hell, amidst the terror and the carnage, stories of incredible bravery emerged. Stories of ordinary men thrust into extraordinary circumstances, men who stared death in the face and refused to blink. These are their stories. The Great War, they called it. But for Alvin York, a devoutly religious man from the hills of Tennessee, the very idea of war was anathema. Killing was a sin, he believed, a violation of God's law. And yet when his nation called, he answered, not with enthusiasm but with a heavy heart and a deep sense of duty. Shipped off to Europe, thrust into the muddy hellscape of the trenches, York clung to his faith. He prayed for peace, for a swift end to the bloodshed. But fate, it seemed, had other plans for Sergeant York. October 8, 1918, the Argonne Forest. York's unit, part of the 82nd Division, found themselves pinned down, caught in a deadly crossfire from German machine guns. Casualties mounted, hope dwindled. It was a situation that called for extraordinary courage, for a man to step forward and defy the odds. And that man, much to his own surprise, was Alvin York. Armed with nothing but his rifle, a pistol, and an unshakable will, York charged into the teeth of the German defenses. He moved with a speed and ferocity that belied his gentle nature, cutting down enemy soldiers with almost supernatural accuracy. Machine gun nests, thought impregnable, fell silent under his withering fire. German soldiers, stunned by the sudden onslaught, surrendered in droves. Alone, against impossible odds, Sergeant York turned the tide of battle. When the smoke cleared and the echoes of gunfire faded, the scope of York's heroism became horrifyingly clear. 35 German machine guns silenced. 132 enemy soldiers captured. For Henry Johnson, the horrors of the Western Front were compounded by another enemy, the insidious evil of racism. A member of the 369th Infantry Regiment, an all-black unit more famously known as the Harlem Hellfighters, Johnson faced prejudice and discrimination, even as he fought for his country's freedom. Relegated to menial tasks, denied the respect accorded to their white counterparts, the Hellfighters were determined to prove their worth. They craved the opportunity to show the world that they were just as brave, just as capable, as any other American soldier. And on the night of May 15, 1918, Henry Johnson got his chance. Stationed near the village of Artois, Johnson and a fellow soldier, Needham Roberts, were on guard duty when they were suddenly ambushed by a German raiding party. Outnumbered 20-2, their situation seemed hopeless. But Johnson, a small man with a warrior's heart, refused to yield. As German grenades exploded around them, Johnson and Roberts fought back with a ferocity that shocked their attackers. Roberts, severely wounded, went down. Johnson, his rifle jammed, grabbed his only remaining weapon, a bolo knife, a wickedly curved blade more commonly associated with jungle warfare than the trenches of France. What followed was a scene of almost unimaginable savagery. Johnson, fueled by adrenaline and righteous fury, transformed into a whirlwind of death. He slashed and stabbed, his bolo knife a blur of steel, driving back the German attackers with each blow. He fought like a man possessed, ignoring his own wounds, his mind focused on a single, burning desire, to protect his fallen comrade and deny the enemy their prize. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found the battlefield littered with German dead and a wounded but defiant Henry Johnson standing guard over his friend's body. He had single-handedly repulsed a German assault, saving his comrade's life and earning the eternal respect of his fellow soldiers. News of Johnson's heroism spread, but it was met with a muted response. Before the Great War, before the dogfights and the aerial duels, Eddie Rickenbacker was a demon behind the wheel. A race car driver, his name was synonymous with speed, daring, and a touch of recklessness. When America entered the war, Rickenbacker, eager to serve his country, set his sights on the skies. He wanted to be a fighter pilot, to pit his skills against the best that Germany had to offer. But the army, initially skeptical of the older, already famous racer, almost rejected him. Persistence, however, was one of Rickenbacker's defining traits. He eventually convinced the army to give him a chance, and once he was in the cockpit, he proved that his skills behind the wheel translated perfectly to the art of aerial combat. Rickenbacker was a natural. He possessed an uncanny ability to anticipate his opponent's moves, to exploit the slightest advantage in the air. He was fearless, aggressive, always willing to push his aircraft to its limits, and his kill count began to climb. He tangled with German aces, outmaneuvered their best pilots, and sent their planes spiraling down in flames. He became a legend in the skies over France, his name whispered with a mixture of awe and fear by enemy pilots. One dogfight in particular cemented Rickenbacker's reputation as America's ace of aces. Engaging 7 German aircraft simultaneously, he outflew and outgunned them all, emerging from the swirling melee victorious. By the war's end, Rickenbacker had 26 aerial victories to his name, a record that would stand for decades. He had become a symbol of American air power, his face gracing magazine covers and inspiring a generation of young pilots. But Rickenbacker was more than just a skilled pilot, he was a leader. He understood that the key to victory lay not just in individual skill, but in teamwork, in the ability of pilots to work together seamlessly in the air. The Argonne Forest, October 1918. A place of shadows and death, where the sun struggled to penetrate the dense canopy of trees, and the very air seemed thick with the ghosts of fallen soldiers. It was here, in this green hellscape, that Major Charles Whittlesey and his men faced their destiny. Tasked with a seemingly impossible mission, Whittlesey and his 554 men of the 77th Division, mostly National Guardsmen from New York City, were ordered to advance into the Argonne, to seize and hold a strategically vital ravine. They pushed forward with courage and determination, but the Germans, entrenched and well-armed, were waiting. The Americans fought bravely, but they soon found themselves surrounded, cut off from reinforcements and supplies. Trapped in a pocket of resistance under constant enemy fire, their situation grew increasingly desperate. Casualties mounted, food and ammunition dwindled, and the forest around them echoed with the groans of the wounded and the dying. Yet despite the overwhelming odds, Whittlesey refused to surrender. He rallied his men, urging them to hold on, to fight for every inch of ground, for every minute of survival. He knew that their sacrifice, however costly, could buy valuable time for other Allied units. For 5 agonizing days and nights, the Lost Battalion, as they came to be known, held their ground. They endured artillery barrages that shook the earth, repelled wave after wave of German attacks, and clung to life with a tenacity born of desperation. They were running out of everything: bullets, bandages, and hope. Their only lifeline to the outside world was a group of carrier pigeons, brave birds tasked with carrying their messages through a hail of enemy fire. One by one, the pigeons fell, victims of German marksmanship. Finally, only one remained, Cher Ami, a valiant bird with a name that meant "dear friend" in French. With their hopes hanging by a thread, Whittlesey entrusted Cher Ami with their final message, a desperate plea for help, for relief from the relentless onslaught. The pigeon took flight, dodging bullets and shrapnel, its small body carrying the weight of hundreds of lives. And against all odds, Cher Ami reached its destination, delivering the message that would guide rescuers to the Lost Battalion's position. The skies of World War I were a realm of both terror and beauty, a strange and deadly ballet played out high above the mud and blood of the trenches. And in this aerial arena, few figures were as daring, as reckless as Frank Luke Jr., the Arizona balloon buster. While other pilots focused their attention on enemy aircraft, Luke had a different prey in mind: the lumbering, seemingly vulnerable observation balloons that floated high above the German lines, providing vital intelligence to the enemy. These balloons, however, were heavily guarded, ringed by anti-aircraft guns and patrolled by squadrons of watchful fighters. To attack one was to invite almost certain death. But for Frank Luke, the risk only added to the allure. He was a daredevil, a warrior who seemed to crave danger, who pushed his SPAD 13 fighter to its absolute limits. He would swoop down on his targets with a terrifying speed and ferocity, his guns blazing, ignoring the swarms of bullets and anti-aircraft fire directed his way. In the span of just 10 days in September 1918, Luke went on a rampage, transforming himself into the most prolific balloon buster in the American Air Service. He destroyed 14 balloons, along with 4 enemy aircraft, his name becoming a legend among both Allied and German forces. His tactics, however, bordered on suicidal. He often flew alone, eschewing the relative safety of formations, preferring to take on the enemy single-handedly. He seemed to court death, to have a disregard for his own safety that bordered on the reckless. On September 29, 1918, Luke's luck, or perhaps his death wish, finally ran out. Attacking a group of balloons near the village of Mervaux, France, his plane was hit by ground fire and forced down behind enemy lines. Wounded but defiant, Luke landed his crippled aircraft and continued to fight. Armed with only his pistol, he held off an entire German patrol until he was finally cut down by enemy fire. He was 21 years old. Even in death, Frank Luke's legend grew. These men, each different in their backgrounds, their motivations, their approaches to war, all shared one essential quality: an unyielding courage in the face of unimaginable adversity. They were ordinary men called upon to do extraordinary things, and in answering that call, they defined what it means to be a hero. Who do you think was the greatest American hero of World War I? Their stories, though separated by time and circumstance, continue to resonate today, reminding us of the enduring power of the human spirit. Let me know in the comments who you think deserves the title of the greatest American hero of World War I. And if you're hungry for more tales from the forgotten corners of history, hit that like button and subscribe. There are countless stories waiting to be told, countless acts of valor yet to be discovered.